a live performer and electronics. That's usually an instrumentalist playing an instrument or singing, but also sometimes a dancer. And if I can, now I want to share you a short video of that experience. This video was done at my last year at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. I was working a lot with dancers while I was there and started to compose this ballet. I call it an electroacoustic ballet. This is only going to be a short sample of it. I'll briefly tell you what's happening here. There are sort of two layers of sound happening. There's this bass layer of drones that you'll hear throughout. And then only when the dancer moves, you'll see something happening. And that's camera input being controlled by the dancer that makes sound. And later on in the talk, I'll show you how that's working. But for now, I'll just show a little bit of this video. The dancer is Karen Shiota, a very good friend of mine. So I think I'll end it there, but if you're interested in hearing more of that, that's all online. Again, the name of the piece is Sounding Bodies. So I believe Marcus has some questions for me.
For sure. Thanks for sharing that with us, Evan. So first of all, I want to know what inspired you to become a composer and conductor of music?
So the first time I really heard orchestral music, of course, I grew up with music. My parents loved to listen to music and sing and whatnot. But the first time I really heard sort of orchestral music is from films. I didn't really have any exposure to classical music, like going to concerts or recitals, but I really loved watching movies with my parents, especially stuff like Star Wars with my dad, and those were some of my favorite pieces of music coming from there. So I was first influenced by film music to write music. That was sort of my first inspiration, and I thought it was really cool that the composer's name was John Williams. I'm like, hey, my name is Evan Williams. We got the same name, and that's pretty cool. And I also saw that he conducted his own music when he recorded with the orchestra for the film. And so that's really some of my first inspirations to do music. I haven't done too much film, but I have done some multimedia work that I have been really proud of. But that was my first introduction to composing and conducting, is seeing film composers. And originally I was going to do that, but halfway through college, I realized, I really do enjoy just writing concert music and this idea of teaching. So that's what I pursued.
I see. So can you tell us a little bit about your role as assistant professor of music and director of instrumental activities at Rhodes College?
Yeah, it's a fun job. It's a big job. It's basically the job of three professors put into one, but we make it work somehow. So like I said before, I teach composition. That's sometimes in one-on-one lessons with students, or also in classroom settings. One of my favorite courses to teach is called Composition Lab, and that's when there's about 5 to 10 students in the class, and all of them play or sing music and they read music, but maybe they don't have that much experience composing. And so every week we talk about a topic, we listen to some pieces, I show them examples, and then I say, okay, you go and write a piece like that or using this technique. And they come back and we play their music. I also play with them or sing or conduct them as they need. And so it's a lot of fun. It's basically hands-on laboratory work with composing. I also teach music technology, as I said before, both intro classes and more advanced classes in music technology. And then the last part, which is actually the biggest part of my job, is conducting the orchestra, the Rhodes Orchestra. We're a small chamber orchestra, usually around 35 to 40 students, also sometimes some community members and faculty members. And every year we put on at least 4 to 6 concerts a year. And that's probably the biggest part of my job, is actually conducting the orchestra and running the orchestra. So it's a lot, but it's a very rewarding job, and it's very cool living in such a musical city like Memphis. And I've enjoyed it so far.
Did you always know that you wanted to be an educator?
Uh, Not always. At first, like I said, I thought I wanted to be a film composer. But halfway through high school, I decided that I would seek a degree in music education, and that's what I did the first 3 years of college. I was seeking to be a music educator. I thought I was going to be a high school orchestra director, and maybe one day eventually be able to conduct professional orchestras. But through college, I realized that teaching young students, even though I do sometimes teach young students like I do in the summer at the Walden School, teaching that every day was not going to be what I wanted to do in life. I wanted to compose more, and I wanted to conduct at a professional level. And so I dropped music education and became a full-time composer, but always continued to study conducting, whether that be over the summer or with professors during the school year. So that's sort of how my career from college, wanting to be a band director and orchestra director, turned into being a collegiate orchestra director and teacher.
I see. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience obtaining your doctorate of musical arts and composition from the University of Cincinnati?
Yeah, so any graduate degree is a lot of stress. It's a lot of work, and especially when you're a TA and having to be a full-time student, which is what I was. So when I was at the University of Cincinnati, I was a TA for electronic music, which actually is sort of at the time it was odd for me, because I didn't really pursue electronic music until I was a grad student. I didn't really like it when I was an undergrad. I thought it was all weird sounds and nothing that I was really interested in. And in fact, my dad always laughs at me. He's a computer programmer and tried to get me into computer programming, and I was never interested in it. And I just thought I won't ever need those skills. And now I use those skills, not to the extent that he does and an actual coder does, but some of my work does involve coding sometimes that I need to be able to do. But when I was in grad school, I really got into electronic music, taught myself and studied with my professor on how to use these programs, and she trusted me enough to teach for my next 2 years at Cincinnati. So I was a TA, the instructor of record, as they call it, for electronic music at the University of Cincinnati, and that was great. While I was there, I also worked on a lot of music that I was really proud of. I completed a multimedia opera that is about the mass murder-suicide at Jonestown that happened in 1978. It uses the audio that was recorded at Jonestown, so it's a very intense opera. I also had a chance to write for the Cincinnati Symphony, something completely different. It was a piece for children, so it was not dark at all, and it used melodies by local children in the Cincinnati area. So it was a really great experience. It was a really stressful experience, but I made it through, and I'm really glad for the opportunity.
It's great to hear. I know talking to you before, I noticed that your music has, gained international notoriety. So can you tell me a little bit about how you believe that your music, got that far out into the world?
That's a good question. So it's a lot of who you know, and once when you're doing good work, which I hope I'm doing good work, at least I'm told that it's okay. That people say, oh, that person, he's really good to work with, and he writes some interesting music, and you basically, someone says, you have you heard of this person? You should check him out, and they say, hey, I heard of you. Can we play this piece? And that's how my big break came through. I wrote this piece called Grime that got a lot of notoriety. It was put on this mixtape by a blog called I Care If You Listen. And a conductor in New York heard that piece and was like, this is amazing. And he decided that I would be the first composer that he commissioned. And so we wrote a piece for him, and that's Urban Playground Chamber Orchestra. And I wrote a piece for him, and that's called Beautiful Death. And then a couple years later, we talked again about, hey, I was like, I really want to write this harpsichord concerto. It's a kind of a weird concept. Are you? And he was like, yeah, definitely, I'm in. And so I wrote the harpsichord concerto, Dead White Man Music. And that piece, it has a very evocative title, very straightforward title, but it's really about how, as a student of classical music, we mostly study the music of dead white European males. When I was in college, even through grad school, in class, I did not learn about any female or composers of color. I only learned about them outside of class. And it wasn't until grad school that when I actually met composers of color or female composers that I, went back and listened to some of the historical composers that have always been working. They just have been left to the wayside. And so that piece is really, there's some anger there, but there's also some admiration for the music of like Bach and Dowland and stuff that I love, but also you get hints of Nina Simone and other Black musicians that I love and have come to adore. And so that piece has sort of been that piece, Dead White Man Music, has sort of been what has brought me some notoriety, maybe some infamy. And it's been done twice now, and it's about to be done again soon. I don't know if I can announce by who yet, but keep a lookout. It will be done at a university, at a major conservatory. So I'm excited about that.
I see. I know you just said that, it brought out a little anger, but can you elaborate more on exactly how it made you feel when, you're not seeing any Black composers and it's all about, the white composers? How exactly did you feel?
Yeah, well, I mean, at first there was just some ignorance, and like I remember I was talking to my aunt about how I was studying to be a composer in grad school. She was like, "Oh, that's really cool. Not too many of us do that." I said, "No, you're right." And she said, "Well, maybe you'll be the first famous Black composer." I was like, "Yeah, maybe." And neither of us knew how ignorant that statement was, because that was in maybe 2012, and we were 60 years away from the first African American winning a Pulitzer Prize for Music, George Walker. Hundreds of years from the great composer Saint Georges de Chevalier, and so many more great composers of color. Florence Price and William Grant Still. And so there were, I didn't know at the time because I wasn't taught about them. And so eventually I did educate myself on who these people were and listen to their music, and the great work that they did in their own time, but that was ignored. So after that, learning that, I became a little bit angry because at first I was like, oh yeah, I'm unique. I'm a Black composer. But then I realized I'm not that unique. It's just I haven't been taught my history.
Right.
And so that gave way to a little bit of anger. And you do hear a little bit of all of that in the piece. You hear some very angry sections. You hear some sad sections, but you also hear some happy sections, joyous sections, and some very reverent sections of both the music that I missed out on, but also the music that I was taught. So.
Thanks. So, what would you say was your, greatest achievement as a composer or conductor?
I would think as a composer, it's that piece I mentioned, Dead White Man Music. It's a big work. It's about a half hour long. One of the only longer work I've done. Well, there are two now longer works I've done. Is that opera, and so I'm pretty proud of that too. But Dead White Man Music has been making more headway in the field than my opera so far. Hopefully soon we might get some headway on the opera. And as a conductor, I would say it was my first concert here at Rhodes. We did a really cool concert. It was called Classics, but I always like to subvert my audience and what they expect. So we did play some Mozart, and we played some Gustav Holst, the first suite for band. I should say our orchestra also sometimes splits into a wind ensemble too. So we have both of those. But then we ended the program with Terry Riley's In C. And if you're not familiar with that piece, it can be from a half hour long to all the way to an hour long. And it's quasi-improvisatory. There are cells of music that each person plays, and they move along at their own pace, rather. And we also invited my colleague, Carl Erickson, to do some live video work. So as we were playing, live video was happening in the background. And it was an amazing performance, and got a standing ovation. And people still come up and talk to me about it. They're like, oh, I couldn't believe that concert in C. That was amazing. I had never heard anything about like that. And so it really meant a lot. And it's funny that you asked as a conductor, because I didn't conduct. Oh my goodness, Carl is here. Carl Erickson is in the chat and saying it was great to collaborate. Yes, it was, Carl. Amazing live video. So I didn't conduct in that piece. I actually played the keyboard because the piece doesn't require a conductor. But I did, sort of act as a traffic cop and say, okay, you guys a little bit louder, you're a little bit softer. All right, you guys play something here. But I joined the ensemble at the keyboard, and so that was a lot of fun. So that was probably my proudest moment as a conductor.
I see. Okay, so I'm gonna shift gears a little bit, and just to add a little bit of context to the tech and culture connection. I just wanted to ask you, what is your perception on your perspective on the connection between music and technology? Because we're trying to allow people to understand that technology is everything. It's not just coding, cybersecurity, engineering, but it's everything in tech. You need technology for basically everything, especially to excel in the workforce. So from your own perspective, what do you think the connection is between music and technology, or creativity and technology as a whole?
So even at like the most basic level, a violin is technology. A piano is technology. Now, of course, you don't need to know all the physics of how it works to be a great violinist or a great pianist. But if you do, it'll make you an even better performer. Same with being a composer or conductor. If you understand how these technologies work, it makes you even better. And so when I actually use electronics in my music, it's not sometimes people see it as a split. It's something different than what I do for my acoustic music. I don't see it as different. I see it as another form of expression. So when I want to express myself a certain way, maybe a violin will do it, maybe a piano will do it, or maybe a synthesizer will do it, or maybe this electronic effect will do it. And so I don't limit myself to what, unless it's a commission and the person says, I can't work with electronics now. Like, okay. But usually, like, if someone says, hey, I want you to write me a piece that's about this, I'm like, that sounds cool. I think that would work really well with maybe some video and some electronics. And if you're willing to, spend some time with that, we can make something really special. So that's how I sort of see the connection. There is definitely a very physical, scientific connection with waveforms and vibrations of air and whatnot. But artistically, technology can really add something to your music. And I really encourage any person in music to at least know how to record and how to edit, basic recording and editing skills, especially today. With COVID, a lot of musicians have learned how to use these programs and skills that they never thought they'd need to learn. They have to record themselves a lot more now. They have to learn how to use these microphones and audio interfaces and stuff like that they never thought they'd have to bother with. And some of them are having a very hard time. But those people who had some experience with tech and embraced it early on, they're teaching, remotely, and they're getting good sound and whatnot. So it's very important to be able to use that tech in your musical life.
See, thank you. And I know you touched on this question I'm about to ask a little bit in your answer just now, but how exactly are you utilizing technology to be more creative and innovative with your music?
Yeah, so there's just so many possibilities with technology that aren't possible with just acoustic music. So I'll tell you about two pieces that really use technology in very different ways. The first piece is a purely acoustic piece. It's called Grime. It's for a string quartet, and it has no electronics whatsoever. However, as I was composing the piece, there was a lot of technology that went into composing the piece. So the piece is meant to sound over time like an electric guitar going through a distortion pedal. But there is no guitar. It's just violin. It's not actually a real string quartet. It's violin, viola, cello, and double bass. And throughout the piece, those instruments use all these different effects and all these different techniques to sound like one electric guitar going through a distortion pedal. So to do that, I analyzed the sound of an electric guitar. I found one that I liked. At the time, I didn't play electric guitar. Now I do. Well, I don't play electric guitar. I own an electric guitar, I should say. And I know how to find the notes and pluck them. So at the time, I found a sound of an electric guitar. I put it through this program called Clean Biosphere that analyzes all the frequencies of the sound, and I mapped those frequencies onto the string quartet. So then what I did is I asked my friends that play those instruments, come in, play this note for me, play it like this, play it with this extended technique, and basically then made a mock-up of what I want it to sound like. And then wrote that out into the piece. So if you go and find that piece, it's called Grime. I hope that you hear how eventually the sound sort of morphs into this distorted electric guitar sound. And so that's how I use technology on the front end of that piece. The next piece I'll talk to you a little bit about is the one I just showed you. And so let me share my screen here. So this right here is the program that allows me to take the sound, the dancing of the person, and turn that into sound. Basically, this program is called Max, and when you open a new what we call patch, it's just this blank white screen here, and so it's all these possibilities, but also very daunting because you have to fill this thing with devices that are going to make really complicated sounds. Max is sort of I like to call it a programming environment with a graphical user interface. So I don't need to learn how to code, I just need to learn how to use these objects that are graphically represented, and I need to know how to connect them to each other in order to make the sound that I want. This patch uses a camera data, and I will say off the get-go, I'm sure anyone who codes, they use resources like Stack Exchange and all that stuff. This is a resource from the people who make Max Cycling 74 on how to use a camera and get camera data. So what happens here is that here in this the screen here, only when I move does it take some data. And it spits out this data through this matrix here. I can either have a minimum amount of pixels changed, I can have a maximum amount of pixels changed, or a mean amount of pixels changed, the average. And that's what I want. And I get that data, I take that average, and then I take it here. That data, as you can see here, is way too small. None of it, I can move as much as I want to. None of it ever gets to above 1. So I have to scale that data from 0 to 1, from 0 to 100, and make it to larger numbers that are more manageable for the computer to understand. So here, this is just comparing two numbers. This is taking the, if this number is greater than or equal to this number, make a sound, okay? And then the sound is this. And this is what it's called the strum instrument in this program, a program within a program, RTC Mix, which works within Max. And you use these arrays to just choose one pitch at a time, and it's random. So it's going to choose between these notes. This is C, F, G, C again, another F, and another C, and another C. Or it can do, let's choose this one. Now it's going to choose between E, F, A, E, C, A again, and another C, et cetera, et cetera. And so basically now every time I move, you should hear something now. So that's how that works, is that every time the dancer moves, it selects some of these notes. Now I can, it can go through this, basically this series of notes, however fast it wants, or I can say, all right, I'm hearing too much of that C, let's get some of those notes, or let's get some of these notes, or let's get some of these notes. So I can tell it quickly, read this C major chord, or read this C major chord, or this A minor chord, G major chord, or this cluster of pitches. I can quickly tell it by pressing these buttons on my keyboard to skip there. And then one more thing that's cool about this, normally this piece is done in a room with 4 speakers, so 2 speakers up front, 2 speakers in the back. And so the camera can follow where the person is and then move the sound in that direction. So let me see if we can't get it. You won't hear, when I move closer to you, it'll sort of sound like it's going behind you, but you won't, after it goes behind you, you won't hear it anymore because you don't have 4 speakers in your headphones. So let's, so the sound can move in the direction of the dancer. And of course, this is a mirror image, so it looks reversed than what it actually is when you hear it outside. So, and I decided to do this piece because I wanted to show how, this computer can be expressive in its gestures. And so what's more expressive in gestures than a dancer? And so as the dancer moves, these beautiful gestures are produced by that motion. So that's a very long question. I mean, that's a very long answer on how I utilize technology in my music, but I hope that helps. And I'm definitely able to answer more questions about this piece if there are any questions.
Thank you for sharing, Evan. That's a perfect segue. So I wanted to open up the floor to ask if anyone wanted to ask Evan any questions about what he presented on. You can also type it in the chat and I can read it to him. So it's up to you.
I have a question. So I assume that your teaching was ongoing in the spring semester and you're probably getting ready to start the fall semester. Technology is difficult for ensemble performances and things like that, but what are some of the ways that that you found that really work to bring technology into the classroom right now? And what are some things that maybe haven't worked so great?
So I will preface this with saying I've been fortunate this semester, and this was planned far and ahead, but it kind of worked out pretty good. I've been granted a leave for the fall. Basically, it's a pre-tenure sabbatical that Rhodes is really great about. They want our faculty to be ready for tenure review, and if they need they feel they need time to develop their tenure portfolio and their research or creative work, you can take a semester to do that. And so I had planned for it to always be in the fall, and so now I don't have to do remote teaching anymore. I might have to do it in the spring. We'll see where we are as a nation with the virus in the spring. But in last spring, when we had to, basically in the middle of spring break, we had to develop an online curriculum in a matter of a week. Some classes really worked well. Composition and music tech almost worked almost better. Not really, but it worked really well to do those classes remotely. What we did for music tech is we basically just asked the students to download a trial of this program called Ableton Live. And Ableton was kind enough to extend their trial from the normal 30 days to 90 days. And so I just basically taught them how to use that program through Zoom, and it worked out pretty well. Orchestra, we basically went to, it's not really possible to perform in group settings through these mediums yet. The latency just doesn't work. There's too much delay between two people trying to play at the same time. But what we did is I basically switched from meeting together to let's do listening journals about the pieces that we were performing. I had them do bi-weekly recordings of their excerpts, so they would have to record themselves playing the excerpt, and I would evaluate that. And so it basically just to keep them up with the instrument and with the music that we've been working on, and so they didn't get behind. The person who is filling in for me for orchestra has some really cool things planned with virtual performance in the fall, and so I'm excited to see what comes out of that. So yeah, it's a hard moment for live music. Some people are doing it really well, but unfortunately there's not a great software yet that can allow for synchronous performance of groups. I will say, though, there's some pieces in my composition class on the last day of our class. We did some text-based pieces by this composer named Paulina Oliveros, and they don't need to be synchronous. It's all basically performance art, and those work very well over Zoom because there doesn't have to be any exact synchronicity. So those work well, but any piece that requires, being in strict time doesn't really work so far. You have to record yourself and someone has to sync up all that stuff together, and that actually takes a lot of work.
Anyone else have any questions? No pressure.
I'll jump in, and I asked this question at a similar question, I think, on an earlier session, but just wondering what role any mentors have played in your development, particularly as you described how you shifted from maybe what you thought you wanted to do in this field as that evolved as you got into it. And were there any mentors along the way, and how did they become mentors? How did you kind of realize that this is someone that I can learn from, that I want to learn from, as I progress down this journey as a career?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was very fortunate when you study music at the collegiate level, there's always this one-on-one relationship with your private professor. So whether whether you're studying an instrument, you have your instrumental teacher that you meet one-on-one with at least once a week, or composition. And all throughout college, I always had at least two of those. Sometimes I had three. I play trombone, and I never stopped studying trombone through college, even though I knew I didn't want to perform professionally. I just, I love my teacher so much. I just always wanted to spend time and learn from him. And he was a great mentor. He knew that, playing in an orchestra or being a soloist wasn't going to be for me. And he tried to really guide me to finding my path through music. So I always appreciate him for that. And then my composition teachers were the same way. And then often I took conducting lessons as well. And so that was another mentor to guide me. And one of my huge mentors, who I actually just texted with last week, but he was both my conducting teacher, and he was also my ensemble director at Lawrence University. He was the wind ensemble director, so I played under him, and then I studied with him. And for a couple of years, I also worked for him as his setup, one of his setup crew. And I realized I learned so much from that, especially the setup crew. Oftentimes I have to do my own setups because we're a small college, so there's no crew that gets paid to do it. And sometimes I let the students do it, but they get it wrong. And so I have to be able to do these quick setups, sometimes even during concerts. And I realized, oh man, setup crew. I learned so much about being a professor through wind ensemble setup crew. So yeah, those teachers have been really great mentors for me all throughout undergraduate and college. And now, as I'm in as a professor, Rhodes is really great about giving us seasoned professors as mentors. I believe one of them is here, Jonathan Fitzgerald. I think I see him on the call. Has been a really great mentor for me, just navigating. There he is, navigating the academic field here at Rhodes, and what I need to do as a professor and as a scholar. So that's been great to be continuing these mentor relationships, even as I become a mentor myself to my advisees. I think I saw something in the comments.
Yeah, Carl Erickson asked the question, do you feel that there are concepts or emotions that are suited to or better expressed using electronics and technology?
I don't know if there are specifics. I think everything can be expressed through technology or through acoustic music. It just depends on how you want to say something. It's what's interesting to me is a lot of people say like, oh, well, does your electronic music sound really different from your acoustic music? And I don't feel it does. I sort of use the same language and form ideas in my acoustic music as I do in my electronic music. So I can't think of right now any concepts or emotions that are better expressed. I will say, and this is actually more cliche, and so it's something I should try to grow out of. I always do like to express more sciencey stuff with electronic music. So I just finished a piece for piano, percussion, and electronics, and it's about the Voyager probes, Voyager 1 and 2. And as you may know, a few years ago, both of them breached our heliosphere and are now the first human-made objects to travel outside of our solar system. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. What if they're lonely, and they have the golden records in them? How would they communicate with each other once they can no longer communicate with Earth? Or what if they encounter some kind of alien life form? And so in that piece, it does use a lot of tech stuff. I have another piece called The Grand Unified Theory of Everything, which is also, it takes two theories of science and explores them through music. So oftentimes with my electronic music, I do have a tendency to go even more nerdy than I do in my acoustic music. And that's sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say it's a crutch, but it sort of is a crutch, because just because something uses technology doesn't mean it has to be nerdy. So like the dance piece, there's nothing, there's actually nothing even philosophical about it. It's just pure musical expression and physical expression translated into technology.
We have time for about one more question.
Evan, it seems like so much of your work is intersecting like science and acoustic and electronic, and so you've got this really sort of infinite canvas of possibilities and some things that might not seem connected in an obvious way, and really even like the topic of this conversation, right? Like, what does music have to do with technology? So what sorts of things do you see as opportunities to build those connections as we kind of move forward, especially right now when things are so topsy-turvy, when we kind of come through the other side of things?
Oh goodness, I don't know. So, I mean, I think I always think I have a weird brain, and so when I see something like, you know, in real life, I'm like, oh, that reminds me of something else, or that reminds me of that article I read, or this that a podcast I just listened to. So I make weird connections that I don't think other people do, but I do think that in this day and era where I think we're all going to be expected to know more about technology now. I think even once this is over, there's going to be some lasting ramifications where we're going to have to be able to still use tech. And so like right now it's awesome. I think I see my mom here. My mom goes to church every week through Zoom, and I think if you asked her a year ago, what's Zoom? Well, even a year ago, I didn't really know what Zoom was. So, it's going to be very important that we still are able to maintain this relationship through technology, but also gain back some of the person to person things that we've lost through this. So. I don't know if I'm answering your question though, but I think those connections are really important, and this virus has done a lot of bad things to our world, but it has brought us a little bit closer to technology and embracing it, and the powerful effect it can have on our lives. And I'm doing some interesting stuff with music. People are like, well, we can't meet, so is there some kind of, can you write us a piece that can be done recorded through Zoom, or can be done remotely and stuff like that? So it's making me think, as a composer, even who does technology, okay, now how do I write pieces that can be done by people who aren't in the same room? And so that's a big challenge.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, everyone who asked a great question. At this moment, I would like to drop the survey into the chat that I mentioned earlier. If you can follow that link and take that survey just to provide us some feedback so we can make any adjustments moving forward to future tech and culture events, and also make sure that we're incorporating all of your feedback and ideas into future events. I'll also play a piece of Evan music while you're taking the survey. It's about 5 to 6 minutes, so you can just.
Oh, real quickly, I shouted out my mom because I see her, but I also see my dad too, so I have to shout them both out. I don't want them to get jealous.
All right. Did everyone have the chance to take a look at the survey? Okay. All right. To close out, just want to share my screen. So first of all, I would like to thank everyone who showed up and supported the Tech and Culture Speaker Series. Also, thank you, Evan, for spending your time with us, your evening, and sharing your experience. It's been a very great event, and I truly appreciate it. To stay connected with us, you can visit the Center State CEO website to learn about additional resources and upcoming events, and also engage with us on Instagram and Facebook at Center State CEO, and also Generation Next. And if you have any questions about how you can get involved with tech and culture, future tech and culture events, you can reach out to us at generationnext@centerstateceo.com, or you can also reach out to me personally. I can drop my email into the chat before the event ends. So I would just like to say thank you again, and everyone enjoy their evening. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor. Awesome. Well, thanks for that.
I appreciate it, Evan. You killed it. Hold on, let me stop recording.
Thanks.